Başlayabilirsin.
Euzubillahimineşşeytanirracim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Elhamdülillahi ve salatu ve selamu ala Resulina Muhammedin ve ala alihi ve sahbihi ecmaîn. Welcome to all the participants and listeners. Inshallah, we will continue from the welcome to all the participants and listeners. My voice is coming back to me. Inshallah, we will continue. Okay. Do you hear me?
Yes, you can.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we hear you.
So we are following up with the 21st word, the second station, which is mainly talking about the heart's wounds, what is called Waswasa. And Harun Pirim abimiz, he's joining from Turkey as well. He will participate and share his thoughts. And Fatih Atabay abi is from South Jersey, I guess. He will be also contributing to the discussion. So we have read the first aspect last week, the first wound of the heart. We have talked about the source of this Waswasa, the whisperings of Satan, Shaitan, and how to deal with it. And this is kind of a follow-up. The second aspect is a kind of a follow-up with what has been discussed in the first aspect. So I will be reading the first paragraph, and for the second time we will be discussing it, inshallah. So second aspect, it is this: when meanings arise in the heart, they enter the imagination. Stripped of form, it is there, they are clothed in an image or form. The imagination, always affected by some cause, weaves images of a sort. It leaves on the way the images of things to which it gives importance. Whatever meaning passes through it, it either clothes it, or wears it, or taints it, or veils it. Whatever meaning passes through it, it either clothes it, or wears it, or taints it, or veils it. If the meanings are pure and clean, and the images dirty and base, there is no clothing, but there is contact. The man with Waswasa confuses the contact with being clothed. He exclaims, "Alas, how corrupted my heart has become. This lowness has made me despicable and rejected." Satan takes advantage of this vein of his. The cure for such a wound is as follows. So I guess before going into the cure, maybe we can talk a little bit about the situation here. A man goes through a process of Waswasa coming to his or her heart. And this is a kind of an approach or understanding of the source of these dirty feelings or dirty thoughts, even in this state of worship, or in any state in day of life, for that matter. So Harun abi, we want to talk about the process here. What's your understanding?
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Good day, good morning, wherever the location is. Firstly, last week I was not here since I'm traveling. I couldn't join recent meetings. But to get the context, I imagine that you started reading this 21st word. Interestingly, this has two parts. So the first part is about daily prayers. The second part is about Waswasa. I guess I'm kind of sure that you discussed why, second part of this Risale treatise is about Waswasa. The first part is about daily prayers. The second part is about Waswasa. So it looks like disconnected, and I'm sure you just talked about it. So Waswasa looks like pops up from a source which is unimaginable in a sense, or just it pops up whenever we are performing something valuable like daily prayers. So it's not a coincidence, or it's not really awkward that Said Nursi just positions this Waswasa part after the daily prayer part. This is something to consider. And also, I was checking the starting verse, which is from Surah Al-Mu'minun. It's kind of taking refuge from Satan's Waswasa to Allah in a way. So yeah, thanks for putting that. So I'm always trying to relate, how Ustad Nursi explains or dives into the ocean of the verse. So this is my aim to try to contextualize this second aspect. So starting with that, it looks like, to understand Waswasa, Ustad Nursi is trying to figure out how this Waswasa mechanism works. So to explain that, he uses the faculties that we have, such as our faculty of imagination, faculty of heart, so inner faculties. And it is quite interesting. Maybe we are not really aware of it, but he deep dives into the inner workings of those faculties amazingly. So looks like any meaning that we have, it just gets into our heart, and over there at the beginning it looks like it is kind of free form, but this free form then touches or kind of gets close to our faculty of imagination. So it looks like heart and imagination are very close to each other to describe, and this meanings somehow gets close to imagination, and imagination is where we are weaving some based on different circumstances and different let's say daily works or professionalism. It just gives different objects for us to put onto the meaning. So over there, when it touches to imagination, it looks like the meaning puts on or touches or wears, depending on the situation, a meaning, and that's the source of Waswasa. And partly he's taking us maybe to observe. I mean, each of us can observe that happening because he is just describing it, and we can just try to observe, and we can just confirm that it works. I mean, any meaning looks like I have an imagination immediately or after a very short time, and after that, I can consider that I have an idea after the meaning, but usually it's not the idea. It is something happening which is less confirming than an idea, what is called Waswasa. So some interesting thoughts or a form of thought, let's say, that can give me harmful effects, or that can make me depressed or upset. So that can take me to a state which I'm not comfortable with. So I think he makes shortly an introduction to the mechanism of Waswasa and how it is related with our inner faculties, especially with heart and the imagination. Thank you. That's my initial thought.
Harun, can we say maybe it is more than a thinking, rather maybe it is a suspicion, something more related to heart rather than mind? Like you give a possibility of something happening or possibility of something in existence. You
Exactly.
suspect, right?
Exactly. I mean, I definitely agree. I mean, it's kind of suspect, doubt,
Yeah.
So it's not something frozen, it's something liquid to describe. So at this point, it it doesn't transform into an idea or concrete thought. It is something that, yes, takes us something which is unstable, and this instability just makes us, feel, uncomfortable in a way. But of course, we will talk about it, maybe why this is helpful and why this is useful for us. This is something coming later, I believe. But in the first place, what I see, Ustad Nursi describes how it happens to us, and we are trying to understand how it really happens in connection to the meaning, which is located maybe through the heart and connects with the imagination.
There is Cezmi added the partition in Mesnevi in Arabic. It's translated by Mustafa Tuna Hocam. Jazakallah khairan for his efforts in this. This passage that follows up under this text that is shared in the group is very much related to what is being said in the second aspect. So maybe we can read both of them together, and so these two different passages may help understand the same meaning together.
Yes, wonderful. But I wonder what Fatih Abi thinks about it also.
Yeah, Fatih Abi, would you like to share your thoughts about this, the process going on here?
Yeah, what comes to my mind is maybe we can give another example, like for the imagination state. For example, on a paper, we can draw a flower, a good smelling flower, and then another paper, we can draw a decaying animal corpse with bad smell. So, like when we think about these both pictures in our hands, they are both made out of like paper and ink, right? They are both the same thing, and they don't have the good smell or the bad smell. I think our thoughts in imagination form is kind of like that. I mean, they are just like the, for example, the bits in the computer. I mean, if you do not process them, they are just like ones and zeros, or they are just like the pictures which are made out of ink and paper. If you work on them, and then like they might have meaning and they might harm you, but in the imagination state, I think we should know that it's just ink and paper, even though it's like an animal corpse or anything dirty. It's just like the animal corpse on the paper, ink and paper, which is doesn't have smell, isn't dirty. I mean, so I mean, we should just differentiate that in our thoughts.
Yeah, that's a really good example, I think, Fatih. Allah razı olsun. That's a good contribution to understand this process. The flower and this corpse, it's on a picture, on a paper, but the way you imagine it, and you start making assumptions, and you clothe it with the meanings inside your brain, and then you start thinking, you start arousing maybe negative emotions or positive emotions, depending on how you interpret that picture on that paper that doesn't really have any particular meaning, I guess. So I guess it would be good to read the passage on the Mesnevi together with this passage to have a better understanding. If I would like to read that part as well. So know this, all you who, upon turning his attention to divine realities, is afflicted by Waswasa. It is explained here as obsessive thoughts, coming from Satan's suggestions or from the diseases of the heart and imagination, and by all sorts of filth that the lower soul's baseness and wickedness poke into the eye of one's intellect, to such an extent that, indeed, dark clouds, pouring rains of infamy, obscenity, and blasphemy pass before his eyes, causing him shiver as he considers the sun of realities. as though just as he extends his hands to mark transcendence and sanctity and raises his eyes for glorification and laudation, he finds his hands soiled by the abominations of his imagination and his sight contaminated by what appears before it from the hogwash of the lower soul's vileness. And then, in his view, those contaminants reflect on what is sacred. Thus, being pained by this situation, one begins pondering those contaminants. Do not fall into despair or distress, nor consider yourself in a state of heedlessness in order to escape from this situation and be saved from this painful blame. So Ustad explained a similar situation in a similar way, maybe a little bit deeper way, and the same process that we have read in the second aspect. And Ustad will also give some advices here. So let's read this advice, or do you want to share your understanding of this paragraph compared to the other paragraph in the second aspect? Harun abi, would you like to, do you have a different understanding of this passage from the previous one?
Not really. I mean, if Fatih abi wants to explain that part, I would appreciate.
Fatih abi, would you like to say something?
I don't have any comments for now.
Okay, so let's not break the follow-up, and let's read the
Sure.
Ustad's advice here. So do not fall into despair or distress, nor consider yourself in a state of heedlessness in order to escape from this situation and be saved from this painful blame. So this process in our imagination or in our minds, in our thoughts, causes us to kind of escape, go away from the presence of Allah, as though it is possible. Colin Hocam was talking about this last week, that this is not possible. You know, this kind of a reflection, the reaction of this situation. There's a painful situation that we observe spiritually, emotionally, and sometimes we feel weak. We cannot deal with it, and we try to escape from the state. And that escape might mean to escape from worshipping of Allah, and which is very dangerous. So, and the Ustad also wants us not to fall into despair. That will also cause us to not, worship enough or not be mindful of Allah enough. So, the Ustad's advice here first is not to escape from this situation, and be heedlessness is not the solution, Ustad says. So there is no harm in this other than that of supposing that there is harm. It is by repeatedly occupying your thoughts with this supposition that you harm yourself. Do you not see that if you look at the sun and its radiant light, the sky and its stars, or a garden and its flowers through the pores of a garment soiled by all sorts of dirt, that dirt does not contaminate what you look at, nor make it murky, but eyes causing him shiver as he considers the sun of realities, as though just as he extends his hands to mark transcendence and I'm trying. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, it skipped a little bit.
Yeah, this PDF program is a little bit.
While you move, something comes to my mind. So recently,
Please,
I had read a quote. I had read a quote from an author. I don't remember the name, but the quote is very nice. So he says, or she says, we usually suffer from imagination, not in reality. I think it is quite connected here. So our sufferings, our feelings, usually connected with imagination. It's not related with reality. It's how we understand the reality. And as Ustad Nursi mentions here, the source of Waswasa, actually, it is how we start to perceive reality. So the human condition brings, Waswasa, and we suffer from Waswasa. But when we understand it correctly, when we know the source of it, in a way, it just collapses. And once it collapses, so we are closer to reality, and we don't suffer from the reality. So here, I think it's kind of the examination of this situation, how, especially Satan makes use of this kind of suffering or suffer type of feelings, because we think that, oh, I'm not obeying Allah, or it's getting in a way that, I'm behaving disrespectfully, even in my worships, whatever. So Satan takes me to the corner in a way that I suffer, and I suffer more. I try to dig into my suffering, but since I'm doing in the wrong way and just trying to, take it to the wrong address, it gets worse and worse, and it can take me to some place, which is horrible in a way. I just wanted to mention this point.
Yeah, this is, as you just said, this is about being human. It's a human condition. It's not maybe even specifically, about this situation, but it's, in social interactions in our daily basis, we have very similar situations. From giving my example from myself, in a daily life, you interact with people, and you communicate with people, and people say things, and then you go home, and then it's late. You put your head in your pillow and start thinking and making assumptions about what people said and what people meant. Did he mean this? Did he mean that? Why did he say that to me? And things like that. Sometimes that happens to me. I don't know. And that's maybe the weakness of my personal the soul. Instead of turning to Allah and then reconnecting with Him, and then knowing all the things that's happening in daily life is coming from Him, actually. And that's maybe a weakness of our iman. We should turn back to Allah, and then we improve our connection. And maybe that's a weakness in our iman that sometimes causes us making dirty assumptions about things happening around us, and not seeing the beauty inside the events, that be that daily interactions or other things, or maybe worldly events as well. I don't know, am I right or not wrong, but these satanic whisperings comes in very various different ways, I guess. So let's finish up the do you want to share, Harun Abi, about this?
Sure. I was going to say maybe the only points, in your what you say, maybe something critical is about connecting this Waswasa with iman. As you know, Mustafa, maybe it's not from the weakness of iman. Maybe it might be on the other side as well. So this is an interesting mechanism actually to consider. And maybe strong believers have Waswasa, and maybe interesting kind of Waswasa as well. I mean, I would love to consider this as a mechanism, which is coming from the relationship of meaning with imagination. I want to consider this relationship, and this relationship can happen to believers, non-believers, or strong believers. Maybe equally somehow.
Yeah, Fatih, would you like to share your thoughts?
Not on this, but we talked about that last week too.
Yes.
There's a part in Gleams, end of the book words, about the levels of knowledge in the mind are various and complicated. I think it's good to remember that, because we are talking about imagination. In the second aspect, I just want to read the starting part of that,
Please.
so that we remember. The levels of knowledge in the mind are various and complicated. There are levels in the mind, complicated, their precepts different. First, imagination acts, then conceptualization comes, then comes intellection, then assent, then apprehension, then comes commitment, and then belief. I mean, between imagination and belief, there are many levels, as we read here. Imagination, conceptualization, intellection, assent, apprehension, commitment, and then belief. So imagination is the kind of lowest level. So when we imagine something bad, does not mean that we're gonna conceptualize on it and then think on it and then make it our beliefs. It doesn't make it's not gonna, it's not supposed to happen every time. So imagination is the lowest level. If you don't conceptualize, if you don't think over it, and then if you don't work on it, then you will have no harm on it, as mentioned here.
So there is a far long distance between imagination and a truth, an existential truth. So there's
and belief,
multiple levels.
Too.
Yeah.
When we look from our perspective, what happens in our mind.
Yeah. So let me finish this.
I think it's an excellent address, Fatih. I think it's an excellent address to talk about this meratibi dima. So this levels in the mind, I think it's very related. Although it's that just takes us, in a way, shortcut way, talks about imagination and heart, but looks like things are very connected. Inner faculties, we can definitely, I think, put the mind into the equation. Mind is related with heart as well, as we know. So, and the levels in the mind, it is kind of getting into details of the mechanism of this Waswasa. And it's quite remarkable and explanatory to say, imagination is the lowest part and it takes, climbs up to the belief. Belief is the maximum, let's say, confirming state of the mind. Yeah, thank you for sharing this.
You're welcome. And just to repeat from last week, some brothers were not here. A brother in Turkey who's a clinical therapist, psychotherapist, they developed a therapy using this part, Waswasa Risale, and the Dimada Maratib part from the levels of knowledge part from the gleams. And I don't know if they published their finding. They were clinically trying it on patients.
Very interesting. I hope we can hear from it.
We read these parts, we reflect on them, and we try to understand them. But this is an experiential, there is an experiential side to this. When it comes to us, when it hits us, it is not as easy as reading these paragraphs. So it maybe needs constant reminding or reading of these paragraphs and really having a good understanding of what the difference between, some people, this could be a psychological, disorder. So some people might not see the difference, the levels, as you have mentioned, Fatih and Harun, between this imagination, and there is a long distance between the truth or the faith or Iman. But in daily life, some people have really difficult understanding or to cope with this problem, to make a differentiation between the two.
Exactly. And I think the first part of this Risale treatise is talking about tahayyul, right? It says, tahayyülü küfür is not küfür. So just imagining, blasphemy is not blasphemy in the first place. So I think it just elaborates on what tahayyül is, and whatever we imagine, it is something different. It's not confirming something. So when we understand this in the first place, actually, we don't fall into despair, and we understand that imagination is a faculty that most of the time we cannot control. It's not under control for several reasons. And when I distinguish, between imagination and confirming, I think most of the puzzle is solved, and it gives comfort in the first place.
So let me finish this paragraph. I was reading the Ustad's advice here. Do you not see that if you look at the sun and its radiant light, the sky and its stars, or a garden and its flowers through the pores of a garment soiled by all sorts of dirt, that dirt does not contaminate what you look at, nor make it murky, but pay attention to that dirt that it may disappear. These obsessive and vain thoughts are like pests and wasps. If you chase them away, they fight you. If you leave them alone, they leave you. This example also really nice. We start playing very nicely. The example of bee or wasp. If you chase them, they attack back, they fight you back. If you leave them alone, they leave you alone as well. So going back to the second aspect and Ustad's advice here, listen, all you unfortunate, just as outward cleanliness, which is the means to the correct conduct of your prayer, is not affected by the uncleanness of the inside of your inner. For example, am I missing a sentence here? Inner, no, okay. For example, you are reflecting on some divine signs or verses when suddenly you feel ill, or an appetite or a stimulation like the need to pass water. Of course, your imagination will see whatever is necessary to cure the ill or answer the need, and will look at it, weave lovely forms appropriate to them, and the meanings that arise will pass between them. But there is no harm in their passing, nor soiling, nor error, nor injury. If there is any mistake, it is in paying them attention and imagining the harm. So very close to the explanation in the Masnavi part, the example of wasps, is Ustad's advice is not paying attention to them much, and the harm only comes when you imagine there is harm.
And very subtle meaning, right? I mean, again, the human condition, we are kind of agents that are subject to external effects. So any external effect, let's count weather, any sign, anything that is, related with our senses, just triggers our feelings, and these feelings just affect the meaning in the first place. So understanding this mechanism, I think, is very important, so that I don't panic. I understand that I'm very complicated, and my imagination can view any image, which is going to be mixed with the reality. So I think knowing this mechanism is really helpful to distinguish what's going on, and it helps us, not to get into the trap of Waswasa.
The example I want to also point out here is that there is a physical need that Ustad mentions, and that physical need of your body is somehow connected to the imagination. So there is a strong connection between the physicality, the physical world, and the imaginary world in your mind. That's in your mind. A physical need may cause, some sort of imagination. Yes, Fatah, please.
Yeah, I think, yeah, there, of course, there's a strong connection. Just to add to your point, I mean, when we are gonna do something, we start imagining. For example, when we're hungry, when we are getting up to prepare food, first, like we plan, our plan starts from our imagination. Like in our imagination, we get up, go to the kitchen, open the fridge, see what's in there, and then take stuff out. Before doing anything, I think, always do that. So, like after those imaginations, we start acting on whatever we're gonna do. So, like, imagination is the start of everything, I think. Like, as you mentioned in the levels of knowledge, I mean, we cannot do anything without those imaginations.
Yes. So just, it reminded me of a particular situation. Just you mentioned hunger. In Ramadan, when we are fasting and the time of iftar comes, and you're about to, let's say you're a group of people, you're about to break your fasting, and then there is this food table that's prepared in front of you, and some of the people, it's kind of funny for me sometimes. Some people say, let's pray first and then eat. And then other people say, let's eat first, eat first, then eat, then pray. So, and then there is this discussion, breaks up all the time, which one is a better way to go. So I suppose this passage also kind of relates to it, as since you're so hungry and your body and your imagination is all about, bringing us new images of eating, how to eat, So it's hard to focus sometimes when you want to pray, especially when the food table is ready in front of you. Am I right?
Interesting.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of related to it here as well. But the main point is not this. Maybe the main point is related to harm that we think. So there is no harm in their passing or thinking about these imaginations. Only harm is paying attention to them. So we have to keep our focus away from this. Any other abis might also contribute. I see Nebi abi is here, Baykar abi is here. Nebi abi, would you like to join and say something about this chapter? If you hear us. I guess Nebi abi doesn't hear or doesn't have a microphone. In other audience. Baykar abi, would you like to say something? Would you like to raise your hand? Okay. So since we have some more time, we can go into Fatah, would you like to say anything about this aspect, or I would go into the third aspect?
No, we can continue.
Okay. So third aspect, it is this: there are certain hidden connections between things. There are even the threads of connections between things you least expect. They are either there in fact, or your imagination made them according to the art with which it was preoccupied and tied them together. It is due to this mystery of connections that sometimes seeing a sacred thing calls to mind a dirty thing. So this is how our imagination or brain is wired up. Some people may have different wires in their brains that are connected to seemingly completely unrelated or opposing things. It is due to this mystery of connections that sometimes seeing a sacred thing calls to mind a dirty thing. As stated in the science of figurative speech, Although opposition is the cause of distance in the outer world, it is the cause of proximity in the imagination. That's really interesting. Although opposition is the cause of distance in the outer world, it is the cause of proximity in the imagination. That is, an imaginary connection is the means of bringing together the images of two opposites. The recollection which arises from this connection is called the association of ideas. So Istat gives an example here. So I will go into the example to have a better understanding. For example, while performing the prayers or reciting supplications before the Kaaba in the divine presence of Allah, this association of ideas takes hold of you and drives you to the furthest, lowest trivia, although you are reflecting on Quranic verses. If your head is afflicted with an association of ideas in this way, beware, do not be alarmed. Rather, the moment you come to your senses, turn back. Do not say, I have done a great wrong, and keep playing with the trigger, lest through your attention, that tenuous connection strengthens. For the more you feel regret, the more importance you give it, and that faint memory of yours becomes ingrained. It becomes an imaginary sickness. Do not be frightened. It is not a sickness of the heart. This sort of recollection is mostly involuntary. So you don't mean it, you don't want it, you don't aim it, it just happens the way it is. Especially in sensitive, nervous people, it is more common. Satan works the mind of this sort of waswasa a great deal. So, Harun abi, would you like to share your ideas about thoughts about this passage?
Yes. Let's talk about it. It's really amazing, you know. So looks like at this aspect, we can understand that in imagination world, everything is close to each other. In reality, let's say good and bad are very distant from each other. From physical perspective, we can say that this is good, this is bad, or we can say this is beneficial, this is harmful in physical world. But in imagination world or in imagination realm, they're very close to each other. So whenever we say harm, we immediately recall benefit. Or whenever somebody says good, you know, immediately our mind pulls bad, you know, at least as word. So it is obvious, you know, that opposites are very close to us, close to each other in imagination world. So, and since, you know, as human beings, we are mixture of, let's say, body and mind in a way, or body and spirit, however we put it, our physical sensing faculties and our inner faculties are mixed, you know, and we are a combination of those faculties. So obviously we will be affected by the proximity that comes from the faculty of imagination and relevant ones, let's say. So knowing that, actually we will be subject to let's say very bad or very harmful views, scenes, whatever we call, from imagination, even if we are performing prayers, even if we are, you know, in a very sacred place, sacred situation. So it looks like this third aspect is really putting in front of us how we are, you know, and how our imagination, you know, puts things in front of us in a way.
Yeah. I guess we also mentioned this last week, but you know, having this kind of discomfort or pain means that you have respect to your connection with your Lord, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you're not, you know, if you don't feel the pain, maybe that's a bigger problem. Having that pain or feeling discomfortable, uncomfortable about the situation is a level of decency or nobleness that you're feeling that this is not right. So your heart is actually in a sound, good shape that you feel that discomfort, and the only problem is the imagination, and imagination, Allah doesn't count you for that, and it's just a temporary situation, and the way to deal with it is not to deal with it or not be alarmed with it as much.
Isn't it actually? I liken this to simulation. So Allah gives us opportunity to simulate. So our imagination faculty is a simulation software for us, so that we can just make use of it, and we are not punished with this simulation. And looks like our brain, our mind works with simulations. Whenever we do simulation about anything, like to solve a problem, or to go to a place, or to find an idea, and the first thing we do is simulation, and it is free for us, it's a given gift,
Yes, that's right.
And thank you for the simulation example, Arnabi. And in simulations, usually, like the extreme ideas or parts are usually like tried. So it's kind of our mind's duty to sometimes think about or remember about those extremes, and then find the middle path.
Yes, isn't it, Fatih Abi? Definitely. This extremes in this simulation actually help us also maybe to balance, or to approach, to affect, or to approach reality in a balanced way. If we cannot go in the extremes, we cannot situate or position rightfully, let's say. So we can see the benefits of Waswasa in the first place once we understand, how it works, as Ustad Nursi does here.
Yeah. So we like to depict, you like to push to the limits of our imagination, and you like to put those, two extremes, too deep, very furthest limits of our imagination together. Like we like to put a beautiful man to a very ugly man, or to a very strong man to a very weak person, and we like to put them into the same story or to the same picture, and to see, and mind somehow likes to play with these opposite ideas. So it's maybe very natural of being. It's a very nature of us as a human. There's nothing abnormal here. Yes.
Exactly, and I remember I had read a paper about the state of the mind. Usually, our mind or our brain makes prediction about something. Like when I look at an object, let's say water bottle, actually first I make a prediction on it, like how it looks like. So for any case, actually, it is mentioned that our brain makes predictions, and these predictions are related with imagination. So in a way, I imagine how this water bottle looks like. After this imagination, I conceive it, I see, or I just confirm, or I just say that, this is the water bottle, with this shape, with the cylinder shape, with this, embroideries on it. It is blue one, this and that. But the catch is, even physically, we know that our brain first makes prediction, and then, it's just approaches to the real object in the physical world, in the simplest case. And it is told that by this way, it is the fastest way for our brain to work, for example. So looks like Allah's mercy, just we know that just prefers shortcuts in everything in the universe, and our brain is no exception in this sense.
Yes. All right. So let's read the cure here again. So the cure for this wound is as follows. The association of ideas is mostly involuntary. One is not answerable for it. In association, there is proximity. There is no contact or intermingling. Therefore, the nature of the ideas do not pass to one another and do not harm one another. Just as Satan and the angel of inspiration being in proximity to one another around the heart, and sinners and the pious being close to one another in the same house causes no harm, so too, if at the prompting of the association of ideas, dirty imaginings come and enter among clean thoughts, they cause no harm. Unless it is intentional, or by imagining them to be harmful, one is overoccupied with them. And sometimes the heart becomes tired and the mind occupies itself with anything it encounters in order to entertain itself. Then Satan finds an opportunity and scatters dirty things before it and gauds it. So that's the playground of Satan. It becomes a playground for Satan. If you're overoccupied with the idea and you start, the mind starting and entertaining itself with all these ideas, so you keep going with the imaginations intentionally, then it becomes, am I understanding right the passage? It becomes for Satan an opportunity to go more about these scatters, more dirty things, to keep you occupied and take you away from the presence of Allah or your clean intentions away from you. So is that how you read it, Harun abi?
Yes, Mustafa abi, as you say, of course, here we are talking about Waswasa, and which is usually associated with a bad meaning, right? I mean, it's harmful. I mean, we talk about harmful effects of imagination in a way when we say Waswasa. So looks like this imaginations that we have is because of this opposite things here in the third aspect. It is mentioned especially the opposite things, and this opposite position is for the things that are ugly and harmful. And whenever we concentrate on this ugly and harmful imaginations, actually that's the playground for the Satan, you know. That's what Satan wants. So once we entertain with it, you know, once we say that, oh, I'm dirty or I'm in a dirt, you know, I got, you know, distracted, or that's really harmful for me, that's the playground for the Satan. That's what Satan wants. And we are getting closer to be trapped. But I also want to ask a question, like, how do you understand this sickness of imagination, or how is it inserted here? Here it is talking about an imaginary sickness. It's not a sickness of the heart. Maybe we can at this point try to understand what is the difference between sickness of the heart and sickness of imagination, or how it evolves into sickness of the heart. Is it easy to be trapped in the state of sickness of the heart, or it takes really long time, or let's say effort from our side to make it a sickness of the heart? What do you think?
So before, how do we, so if I'm understanding right your question, how do we differentiate if this thought is coming from the heart or from the place that is really close to the heart, that is called Rümme Şeytaniye? So there is an imagination. So basically what happens is, if the image is dirty, we should know, right? We should know that this image is coming from, not from our heart, I guess, but from somewhere that's close to heart. Or is it possible that this is really, so this is your question, right? Is it possible that this is actually not coming from Lümme-i Şeytani, but directly from the heart? Maybe our heart is inflicted with some bad diseases.
I feel like here Ustad Nursi wants to tell us that if I don't do this imagining process deliberately, that's the key, what I understand, it should be kind of sickness of imagination. But if I start to do it deliberately, like there's nothing external to trigger my imagination, nothing else. But, I kind of force myself to imagine, I'm, thinking loudly in this situation. So I understand that I'm forcing myself to imagine in a way. Then it goes to the boundary of sickness of heart. This is what I understand a little bit. But I'm questioning once again how these things, become really harmful. Otherwise, we know that Waswasa is not harmful. This is what Ustad Nursi is telling us.
Fatih, what do you have any answers?
Yeah, again, like when I think it with the levels of knowledge, I think that problem starts with conceptualization. So when you start to conceptualize every bad imagination that comes to your mind or heart, I think that becomes kind of a sickness. That's where it starts to become sickness of the heart, because whenever it comes to your mind, you start to conceptualize. I mean, whatever if I act on it, and then it's gonna like go deep and deep in your thoughts, and then maybe you're gonna someday you're gonna start believing it, or maybe someday you're gonna act on it, which will be real harm. So like whenever those kind of thoughts comes, I think as advised here, we just stop it there, leave it as a part of our imagination, and then just leave it there. Otherwise, if we work on it, then the danger of harm becomes real.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Fatih. It seems it is definitely related with this, again, the level of information coming from this level of mind, actually. Maybe this being volunteer is related with this tahakkul, intellect, or other states of the mind, which is close to belief, affirming.
So if it is voluntary, then am I putting it right? I don't know. If it is voluntary, there is a problem. But if it is involuntary, that's okay, right?
Yes, very, very critical words, actually. Even I don't know, maybe we can differentiate being volunteer, but again, maybe at the level of imagination, we can use combination of imagination and voluntary. But otherwise, if we separate them, I say, definitely it looks like if it is involuntary, it's okay, and we should not pay attention in a way to be volunteer, to work on it. As Fatih Abi says, we shouldn't work on it.
And if it is voluntary, it shows that you're planning on doing that thing which is bad. I mean, if it is voluntary.
And once it is voluntary, you wouldn't be alarmed or you wouldn't be bothered with it. You will enjoy the idea, whatever you're imagining, right? So being bothered is also a sign that it is involuntary.
Yeah, but I mean, here's the thing. The people who are sick with this illness, they cannot differentiate the voluntary and involuntary. Maybe they can not even differentiate between imagination and conceptualization. So they think that it is something real. So saying that, oh, no, it's not real sometimes wouldn't help them. I mean, you need to go deeper to explain to them and then make them understand that it is not real. If they understand this as it is like this, then they wouldn't be having any issues or problems with those thoughts.
Okay, thank you, Fatih abi and Harun abi. So we have finished up the third aspect. I guess we have some sort of understanding of this versus how it is coming and what is the process and what should be the right reaction to this situation, and how Satan's play with it and how to be saved from these Satan's ideas or Satan's games. So I will finish up here. So would you have your last sentences? Do you want to add anything, Harun or Fatih abi?
Thank you so much. It was really beneficial and joyful. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your contribution. Fatih abi, would you like to add anything else?
No, thank you. And let me mention here, maybe some of us didn't hear, Colin Hocam was sick. That's why he couldn't attend. He is asking for our prayers. I think he got COVID and he wasn't feeling well today. So let's pray for him for his well-being and shifa, inshallah.
May Allah give him shifa, inshallah, as soon as possible. And there is a question here. Somebody from the group is asking Fatih abi, particular to your, you mentioned a study.
I replied.
Okay, thank you so much. Jazakallah khair. So I will end up here. Subhaneke la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana innaka antal alimul hakim. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.